We're going to begin with shoot, I got to bring up thing.
Jiminy Cricket, Ryan.
Well, I switched up. Okay, pause.
From ScienceSortOf.com, you're listening to Science Sort of.
Welcome to Science Sort of. This is episode 281, and our theme this week is Poli Sci Sort of. I am your host, Ryan Haupt, and joining me to talk about things that are science, things that are sort of science, and things that wish they were science from not far from me in the colony of Virginia, East Virginia, I should say. It's Abe Padilla.
Hola desde la Virginia.
And joining us from slightly further west in the Occident is Joe Batwinis.
Hello, everyone.
And we are very excited to have as our guest this week, Jess Phoenix.
Hello. Hi. Great to be here.
Hi, Jess. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So Jess is running for Congress. She is running for California's 25th district against Republican incumbent Steve Knight. She's running as a Democrat. And we were interested in talking to Jess because, Jess, you are, prior to entering the world of politics, a volcanologist, just like our buddy Abe.
Yeah.
Woohoo! Yay, things that blow up.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, so that's a feeling some people have as a paleontologist. So I have more of the sedimentary life science side of geology. The exploding rocks make my work very difficult.
Yeah, I could see that. But hey, occasionally you get cool stuff that's preserved in volcanic ash. So, it's not always bad.
Yeah,
that's true. There is a really good fossil site in Nebraska called the Ashfall site. That's a good, if you're into the ungulates and tooth wear and what it looks like when rhinoceroses are chewing on silicate glass sort of stuff. But that's not what we're here to talk about. What we're here to talk about, well, first we want to talk to you about your science. So you started out your career as a scientist, and we want to hear about that. So can you kind of tell us your story and your journey into the world of volcanology?
Yes. So I actually didn't start as a scientist. That's the funny thing. When I was an undergrad, I took an intro geology course, and it was the most fascinating thing to me. But I didn't have enough time to switch majors. So I actually had to finish my history degree. But I loved geology, and I took as many classes as I could before graduation. And I didn't know that volcanoes were the best thing ever until when I was in grad school for geology. I had enough of working in libraries and things, as you do when you have a history degree. And I, signed up for grad school. I did that whole thing, and I got a volunteer researcher position at the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory. And it was love at first hike, I guess. I guess that's what geologists do. And ever since, it's been volcanoes and, a little bit of climate science research, because I've done cosmogenic nuclide dating work in different places around the world. And I've even done natural resources work too. So I've got a little bit of that sedimentary action in the coal fields of the Bowen Basin of Australia, and wanted to make the world a better place using my superpowers of academic and industry experience. And so I founded the environmental science research nonprofit that also does education work called Blueprint Earth. And it's very interdisciplinary, and we do research in the Mojave Desert. We bring students out, a lot of students who wouldn't normally get a chance to do field science, and they work with scientists who teach them how to do good field science. And we're basically trying to catalog the environment to create a functional blueprint of it. So yeah, that's what I've been up to before politics.
So let's go all the way back. I want to know about your history in history. So where'd you go to school and study history?
Awesome. Well, I went to Smith College in Western Massachusetts, and I started an English major and had a falling out with the English department over, the poetry of T.S. Eliot, as often happens. And
I find him to be a very divisive figure.
Yes, the modernist poets are quite relevant constantly. So yes, I ended up having enough credits for a history degree, so that's what I went with. But
it was a real once and future thing, huh?
Well, the interesting
come on, that was a good T.S. Eliot joke, was it not? Thank you.
It was. I know. Well, you don't know how much credit to give people when they do like brilliant things, because it can add to their ego.
That's fair. I'm sure.
Ryan doesn't need any help there.
Fine.
But that's all right. You give yourself credit, so it all works out.
I always do.
You have to. Yeah, you have to stand up for your own work, damn it. But no, I mean, I do love history, but it wasn't quite old enough. And that's what I mean, I liked English at first because it was, kind of the history of culture. But then I studied U.S. history and then said, that's not old enough. And then said, okay, British history, that's not old enough. And then finally it was Greek and Roman history. And I was like, yeah, that's not old enough either. And then geology sort of was the oldest history of all. And it all connects in a way.
Well, that was actually something I wanted to ask you about with the history connection is something we talk about on this show a lot is when you become an earth scientist, one of the most important tools I think you have to develop is a perspective of deep time. And most earth scientists I know develop that deep time perspective by getting dropped into the deep end. And I don't think I've ever talked to anybody who took like an incremental path towards that sort of deep time perspective. And so do you think that changed the way you think about Earth history, or how does the idea of Earth history change your perspective on human history, and like what's kind of the interplay there?
I definitely think it gave me sort of a different perspective. And when I was teaching at Cal State Los Angeles, I taught geology and oceanography, and I would have students and you could tell their minds were just being blown when I would say like, hey, we're going to go out on the parking lot, the garage roof, and we're going to draw out the geologic timescale with sidewalk chalk. And, we're going to have you guys standing at increments all along it. The concept of how far we've come, as a planet, and then how very short we've come as a human species relative to that would always blow their minds. So I think when I came to it, I had this knowledge that the planet had been around for a long time, but seeing all of the conflict and all of the innovation and discovery and exploration that had happened throughout the course of human history, and then realizing like, okay, that rock sitting right there is older than all of that, and it's just a rock. That was really mind-blowing to me, and it really helped me put everything in perspective, because I know it's very easy as geologists to become very cynical about it and say, well, geologic time, that doesn't even matter, but or like when I talk to people about say Yellowstone, for instance, and they always, volcanologists, we get that all the time. Oh my God, what about Yellowstone? And I always say, the odds of that happening on any given day in a human's lifetime are not that great. And then they go, oh, I'm like, yeah, the world operates on a different scale than we do. So yeah, it just informs it a little bit. And I think that understanding, that this is a vast thing that we happen to live on the surface of, and we're part of it in a really deep and intricate way that we're not always fully aware of. I think once you have an appreciation for that, then you start to really open your eyes towards the interconnectedness of all of nature, and we're part of that, even though we like to separate ourselves at times.
Right. Silly me, the aerospace engineer thinks of things since 1903 when the Wright brothers flew, and I think that's my time scale. I feel so lame.
Well, okay, like Abraham probably knows how short, modern volcanology is in terms of timescales. Just since St. Helens, we've had basically revolution after revolution in the field. So we're a real young science. So I hear you on that end too.
Yeah, it's amazing how much it changes and how quickly it can change. The invention of one new type of technology, or, development of better methods like mass spectrometry, the way it's changed in the last 30 years alone. We've had to rewrite and reinterpret some of the work that took 100 years to figure out in the early part of last century.
Same for paleo. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So that would also apply to paleo with isotopes and the like.
Yeah, isotopes a type of geochemistry.
Yeah.
I got my hackles up.
Yeah, it is. You and I are both geochemists, right? So that's what we have in common.
If only I understood anything you did.
In our research.
So Jess, you finished your degree in history and then stuck around. Did you stick around for a master's at Smith, or did you go somewhere else for your master's?
No, my master's was actually at Cal State University, Los Angeles in geology. And the reason that I was drawn to that school, I was considering going back and getting a second bachelor's. And I actually applied and was accepted to University of Hawaii for a second bachelor's in geology. And I was like, oh, do I really want to get a second bachelor's? That's another 4 years. That's so painful. And then I found that the California State University system has a program where you can actually make up the requirements for a master's degree while you're a current grad student in that field. So you could say be a geologist and want to go into music theory, and you could actually be a grad student in music theory, and you would take grad courses, but then you would also take the ones we're missing. So that's what I did for geology. And I had taken a few classes. Like I had taken structural geology. I had taken intro oceanography, geomorphology, structural, and chemistry, and then something else. I forget what the sixth one was. And so I had to make up like mineralogy and petrology and optical mineralogy. So like I was taking classes with the undergrads while I was also doing grad work in geotectonic development of Southern California. So it was cool because sometimes I'd have to go to the professor and go, all right, so I haven't learned that yet, right? And they were all really great and understanding, and it was an awesome experience because I was learning from the undergrads at the same time I was learning with the grad students. And the professors, instantly when I got to the department, they were very collegial. And they said, I went to the department chair and I said, oh, Dr. Bishop, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, no, call me Kim. And I'm like, oh, really? Why? And he said, because you're a colleague and you're going to be a colleague. And, I already respect your abilities. So, just talk to me like a normal person. And I blew my mind.
I just think it's a neat program that they offer that allowed you to just kind of jump right into geology.
Yeah.
Yeah, and anybody can do that at any of the Cal State schools. So, if anyone's ever thinking about getting a master's in something they don't have a bachelor's degree in, check out the Cal State system because it's pretty innovative and it definitely allows you to get on to a new career or a new path a lot faster than going back and getting a second bachelor's would.
And I think that attitude, even if it's not emplaced in like an official university setting, is pretty widespread amongst grad schools that at least I've been affiliated with or am aware of. Like I've definitely had friends who came into a master's in earth sciences and didn't have like some of the basic chemistry requirements, and so we're taking undergrad chemistry to get caught up. And it was an issue, but it wasn't insurmountable.
Yeah. And like for me, it was physics for me because what is a history major doing with physics, right? So.
Right.
I had to take like college level physics, and that was funny because it was just a general education class, and I was sitting there, I was 26 years old, and I'm in class with these like 18-year-olds, and I looked young enough that it wasn't like they would call me out, but man, did I have better study habits than a lot of them. And it was like I was so grateful for having gone through the ringer once before. It made college level physics way easier taking it as a grad student. I will say that.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. I went the other route where I finished a degree in biology and then still wanted the geology degree. But the earth science advisor in the department at Santa Cruz up in Northern California, she convinced me that I could get the degree done in a year if I just crammed everything in because I had enough like of the upper level classes. So my first quarter of my fifth year, I was taking Intro to California Geology with all these freshmen, and then by the third quarter, I was preparing for field camp, and it was too much.
Wow,
sounds aggressive.
Yeah, well, it's because like a lot of geology has to kind of marinate and percolate, in your brain. Particularly like the 3D, like the elements of mapping and structural, like that stuff. If you're not making it right on, like ooh, I feel for you.
Yeah.
I definitely visited the same field sites multiple times as an undergrad, and the second or third time, everything clicks structurally, and you're just like, oh, that's how it all fits together. And you can't get there earlier. You need so when we talk about earth scientists need the deep time perspective, I say the second most important thing is 3D spatial reasoning.
Absolutely.
So you have to be able to see everything as it exists.
Yeah. I used to TA the mapping class, at Cal State LA, and man, I would get students in there who no one had ever asked them to think in 3 dimensions in any way. And, a lot of Cal State LA is a what's known as a minority serving institution. So it's mostly Latino, and then African American and Asian American and Pacific Islander. And then there's, Caucasian students as well. But it's like you get student who they've never taken a field anything, and then they suddenly get interested in geology, and when you tell them like it's all about thinking in 3 dimensions, it's like their minds just get blown. And it's it's the same thing you see on any other school, but I think a lot fewer students at a school like Cal State LA know that geology is a profession and know that it's something that it's actually a job you can do. And so when they start to be introduced to it, it's just the coolest thing to see people get so excited about going, I get how that fold works or this syncline or whatever.
And I think that's an interesting, an important point to make as well, that I did my undergrad at USC and I was actually a business student first. And I didn't enter the geology field until my second year in undergrad. And it was from traveling that I found out this was even an option to pursue some kind of career, or profession in geology and earth science.
Wow.
And in our department at USC, the majority of students that entered the undergrad geology degree were students that had to take a science course. And so they took geology, intro to geology, and they decided, wow, that sounds really interesting. And I didn't know that was, a full degree option that I could pursue, and they would sign up for it. But yeah, it's interesting that it's most people in their early years, like high school and such, are introduced to the idea of earth sciences, and, volcanoes, I can remember from when I was little, have always been intriguing. But that concept of it being a job was never introduced to me until, second year of college, when I met somebody that was doing that.
Yeah, it's not that uncommon. Like, I just think the earth scientists in particular aren't doing that good of a job of getting the message out that and that it's a profession. And I think we can do a lot better, because there's so many people who'd be interested in this as a field. It's just, you gotta convince them that it's there and show it to them. And actually, my nonprofit does a lot of that. Like, we actually bring, if you guys are ever in Southern California, let me know, because we bring scientists into classrooms of elementary schools. And we work in particular with one school that's got 99% of the students are Latino. And it's now an LA County School District STEAM Academy. And so we partnered with them, and we bring students, and scientists together, and the scientists say, you can be a biologist, you can be a geologist, you can be a hydrologist. Here's what we do. You can be an engineer, you can be, an atmospheric scientist. And they show them pictures, and then they do hands-on activities, and they talk about, to the students about their experiences. And it just blows their minds. When like, yeah, you can study volcanoes. And they're like, whoa. So that's all they need. They just need an introduction.
Absolutely. And I think earth sciences, at least in my experience within vertebrate paleontology, has gotten better about gender representation, but racial representation is still sorely lacking. Part of it is just, where in the world do you want to study where fossils come from? And so, like, certain areas such as China are much better represented racially than other areas like sub-Saharan Africa, where there are fossils, but there aren't institutions there that can help people get, the work done. And so I think empowering young people at all levels and just showing them, hey, this is a thing. It's huge, because kids love fossils, but they don't think of fossils as a potential career option that they can choose. I've literally had parents tell me, "Oh, my kid's too old for dinosaurs." I'm like, "But you're telling that to me, an adult who that's my job." That's not helpful.
You're never too old for dinosaurs.
They're too old for you.
Never. I just order a set of dinosaur
and that's when
cutters.
I throw a chicken at them live.
Oh, that's funny. But that's actually something that's a big, just a big point that I try to push all the time when I'm doing any sort of SciComm work. And, it's so important to communicate the value of what we, and one thing that I always say is that, we're all born as scientists. And that's because, when you're a kid, you really are, you're testing out hypotheses all the time. I mean, you're like, I'm going to stick that thing in my mouth. I wonder if it'll taste good. And, I wonder if I hit my head on this wall, if it'll hurt. Like, that's what you do as a kid. And, as we get older, we get squeezed, and the pressures of life and, finding somebody you want to date and, getting through school and trying to find a job, like that sort of squeezes the curiosity out of people a lot. And I think that that's one of the biggest problems we're seeing today is that people aren't encouraged to develop that curiosity and that everybody has innately. So if we can just foster and encourage that in kids and tell them to hang on to it, particularly young girls when they hit middle school, if we can keep that curiosity, whole for them longer, then we're going to have way more people who believe that they can do science and believe that science is accessible to them.
Absolutely.
So Jess, where were you in your career with your master's and beyond, where you decided to take your passion for SciComm and science outreach into an actual organization with a 501c3, which, we talked to a lot of people who are interested in SciComm, but very few go that extra mile to actually establish foundation or organization. So, tell us that story.
Sure. So I actually went to do my PhD work in Australia after I got my master's, and I did all but dissertation there. They actually ended up changing the project on me a few times, and I wasn't ending up researching what I wanted to do. So I left the program, and I actually worked in natural resources then, and it showed me kind of the difference between academia and industry. And I realized that, there's a lot you miss in both sides of things. Like if you're a pure academic, you miss a lot of the kind of the efficiency and the purpose behind a lot of what they do in industry. If you're industry only, you don't necessarily get to ask the big picture questions like you do in academia. So I had actually been on a research cruise on the coast of Hawaii at one point, and I remember seeing a fish using our submersible. It was down 5,000 meters deep. And I saw a fish, and the fish was really weirdly shaped, and there are not very many large fish at 5,000 meters deep. So I said to the microbiologist who was sitting next to me, "Oh my God, what's that? What's that?" And he just kind of looked at me and said, "I don't do macrofauna." And I was like, wow, okay. Because, I'm curious about it. I'm like, hey, I want to know. So what I realized, from working in both industry and academia is that oftentimes we get so compartmentalized and siloed that we forget to see the forest for the trees. So when I came back to the United States, I said, look, I've seen the destruction that goes along firsthand with mining operations, but I'm also a pragmatist, and I know that we're not giving up our cell phones or our flat screen TVs anytime soon. So we need to extract resources still. But there are better ways we can do this, and there are better things that we can do to rehabilitate environments when they're damaged than what we're currently doing. So I talked to my husband, Carlos, and he's a data expert. And we talked about how much data we would need to generate and wrangle if we wanted to understand how environments function as systems. And that's how Blueprint Earth was born, is basically we were thinking, well, wouldn't it be cool if we could look at an environment from the microbial level all the way up to the atmospheric conditions? And we saw how everything is connected. And that is our blueprint, is where those connections exist. And then what do we do with it? And I thought, well, first off, we got to get scientists talking to each other. Then we've got to get scientists teaching students, because a lot of students who I know and I've worked with, they can't afford field camp. So this was a chance for us to get them out to the desert and to the other environments where we're hopefully going to be working when we've got more funding, but to do that at no cost. And they can learn right from scientists who work in industry and academia and the private sector, all of those good things, and the government. So we have scientists who come out and teach the students, and we oftentimes are teaching the students basic field skills, because a lot of them have never been camping before. And then, adding on to that, I don't want a student's first exposure to geology or biology or something to be second year in college. I want it to be when they're young. And that's why we started the part of what we do called Blueprint First, and that's the elementary outreach program. And through all of that, and just how excited I get about it, and how, interesting I find it. I got people ask me all the time, hey, can we do this TV show about volcanoes? We're going to call it Volcano Hunters. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't work. There's some reasons why. Abe probably knows about this, where it's, they want you to basically be like storm chasers, but for volcanoes. And I'm like, there are governments that handle those things.
Yeah.
It can't just show up and, oh, hey, guys, volcanoes are erupting. We're going to go save the world. Like, that doesn't work. So I would shoot them all down. And then I finally got a call from one that sounded more promising. And I thought, well, here's a chance to kind of bring field science to the popular conscious, and bring it like the way that, Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye bring, the more lab-based stuff and the theoretical stuff to the public. So I said, hey, why not? I love talking about this stuff. And if you can't explain geology, then you've got a problem, because geology is very, very visual, and you can actually touch what you're dealing with. So that's kind of how I went into it. And Blueprint Earth has allowed us we've taken over 150 students in the last 4 years of fieldwork, 5 years of being an organization. But we've taken them out to the Mojave, and they've gotten hands-on experience. And we've had students who are first-generation college students who come from backgrounds where they don't speak English at home. None of their parents have had higher education of any sort. And they said, oh, well, I'm going to go into nursing. I'll do biology. They get wrangled into going out to the field with us, and now like one of them is working as wildlife biologist at the Grand Canyon, and another one is she started her own company leading people on guided science hikes in the LA area where she talks about geology and biology. And we have had students go on to grad school. We've helped them get jobs. So it's really just about providing opportunity to people and showing them that science is accessible in every possible way.
That's really awesome.
Yeah.
It's cool that you've got somebody off running their own science tour business.
Yeah, we need more of that, right? I mean, it's not just hiking, it's hiking and learning.
Right, absolutely.
Your point about there not being great spokespeople for field sciences, I think is actually really well spoken. I'd never thought about that. I don't know that Bronx born and raised and Manhattan based Neil deGrasse Tyson is the best field scientist representative we could possibly have. I think we can do better. And
well, I do have and I think Abe will really appreciate this. I have a small bone to pick with Neil deGrasse Tyson. When I meet him, it will be purely, in fun.
His full name is former guest of the show, Neil deGrasse Tyson. That's how we refer to him. That's how we refer to him here on Science Sort of.
Oh, okay. So that's a very long and official title. But he was on Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me on NPR, and I listen to that show all the time. And they gave him on their Not My Job segment, they were asking him to choose, A, B, or C for like 3 different questions. And one of the things was, which of these health treatments is the real one? And, one was like leeches or something. And one was, they said they put hot lava rocks on your back, to relax you or whatever. And then the other one was some forgettable thing. And when he was talking through the question, he said, well, it can't be that one because lava is always hot. And I'm like, no, right. It's not.
I remember that episode, actually, or that show.
Did you yell at the radio too? Because I did.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I had a very similar reaction.
It's not just me.
Well, he always ends his podcast with and always remember, keep looking up. And I actually called him out on that when we had him on the show, because I'm like, there's a lot of science that happens down, too. If you just look down, there's some good stuff there, too.
Yep. But hey, you know what? That's the thing. The bigger you are, the bigger of a target you are.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're all fans of Neil here, but he's a very easy person to pick on just because he is verbose and also as much as we like him, he is very much a physicist in terms of he wants to reduce everything down to its simplest components, which doesn't always work with more complex sciences. I remember hearing him get called out about when he said something about how biology is just complicated chemistry.
Oh, wow.
Evolutionary biologists called in and explained to the astrophysicists how actually biology is an emergent property of chemistry and it's not just chemistry. It was amazing. Because it was one of the few moments where he had to be like, oh, yeah, you're right. That's a really good point. And I was overly simplistic. And it's hard to get a physicist to say that.
Yes, it is. And he is brilliant and awesome. And I want more ambassadors for science in all fields. But I will tell you that, I'm one of the people I've met recently is Bill Prady, who helped create the Big Bang Theory, the TV show. And I have yet to take up with him their constant ribbing of geology. And I'm like, come on, we are a science. So it's a minor thing.
No, it's a minor with the pickaxe and the helmet.
Yeah. Oh, that was good.
Rock hammer, Ryan. Get it right.
Sometimes a pickaxe is also needed to unearth the sediments to then rock. And anyway, not the point. The point is, speaking of dealing with people with very reductive worldviews who just want to oversimplify everything to the point of nonsense, you recently entered politics, and we're going to talk about that in our next segment coming up in just a second. Well, it will not be an episode of Science Sort of if we didn't talk about what we are drinking. Joe, are you struggling?
I am struggling. Struggles are being had.
All right, Abe, go first.
What be you struggling with?
No, Abe, I want you to go first while Joe struggles. Because, Abe, your drink, if I think I know what it is, involves quite a mighty struggle indeed. My voice is a little extra sultry because I'm getting over a cold.
I see.
Yes.
Just a mighty struggle indeed. Yes.
Hace mucho frío.
Yes. So for my drink, I decided to take us back into the depths of the Antarctic history.
And the history of this show.
And the history of the show. That's true. Yeah. So I am drinking McKinley's Rare Old Highland Malt Whiskey. The specific one that I'm drinking is the Shackleton Blended Malt Scotch. That is recreation of the original Shackleton whiskey bottles that were taken down by Shackleton himself to Antarctica.
That's cool.
Yeah, and we talked about this a long time ago on the show, but basically a Kiwi, a New Zealand-based expedition, went to his camp, which is still frozen out there on the ice.
It is.
And was able to recover some of this whiskey. And they...
Oh, like actual whiskey. They let actual whiskey out there,
like
not just the bottles.
Glass bottles still full of whiskey.
Wow.
Yeah, so this was the Shackleton's expedition, which he led in 1907. It was the Nimrod expedition.
Funny name.
Still with the goal of getting to the South Pole. And they built a hut on Ross Island. And as most people probably hopefully know, that expedition didn't work out too well. So, everybody just kind of packed up and left when the ship was ready to go. And so they left behind a bunch of stuff in their hut that has been there since early 1900s. And in 2007, group of Kiwis from the Antarctic Heritage Trust was doing some conservation work at the hut. And they pulled up some floorboards and found a case of McKinley's Rare Old Malt Scotch whiskey. So the cool thing was that McKinley's, the distiller from back then, is still sort of around, right? Nowadays, it's the White and Mackay distillery, which basically has transferred ownerships, changed names, but they still hold the McKinley's brand name. And so they took one of the bottles of this Ernest and Shackleton's Hut whiskeys to the master blender at White Mackay, Richard Peterson, and he did a bunch of tastings and basically attempted to recreate the exact same blend.
Wow.
The same flavor profile.
Same flavor profile.
That's intense.
Based, which is a blend.
And this was years ago. Like this was in the early days of the podcast. He was doing this. So, late aughts, early 2010s. Because we were talking about it back then. Because I remember us talking about the story. And I remember us saying, like, on the show, Charlie and I were saying, how much would we pay for a shot of the actual whiskey from Antarctica, not the blend?
Yeah.
But this is a recreation of that flavor that is now available on sale.
Right. And it's actually the third attempt at recreating it. There have been 2 different versions that were put out with very limited release. And this particular bottle that was put out, I believe it was late last year, is their third attempt at it. And the goal with this one was to make it a little bit more accessible because the first 2 versions were in the order of like $200 to $300 a bottle.
Ooh.
Yeah. So it's kind of cool that they decided, this was a flavor that they thought they could do a little bit more on a budget. So more people could try to, envision that flavor that has been preserved on the ice, under the ice in Antarctica for 100+ years.
And what do you think of it?
I'm quite a fan of it.
Were you a Scotch guy before this, or is this one of your first entrees into Scotch whiskey?
I've recently started getting into Scotches. And
so like you got into Scotch and Mezcal around the same time.
Yeah,
like,
so
everything smoked.
The last few years.
Entered your world.
Yes,
that's fun.
It is true. But luckily with this one, Highland Scotches, in my opinion, are not as smoky as some of the other more traditional scotches. So they're,
I'd agree with that.
To me, the cleaner of the scotches. So that was a really nice intro to the Scotch world. Nowadays, I'm like really into the really, really smoky peaty, like Isla's, and I really enjoy those. This one is something that I could drink more often, that I could sit down and really enjoy without having to think about it being a Scotch. It's drinkable, it's smooth, it's balanced, it's really nice.
Cool. And you're just having it neat, or having it with a rock, or what are you doing?
Just having a neat dram of the Shackleton whiskey.
All right. Joe, did you finish fighting the wax?
Well, I finished fighting the wax. We'll see if I finished enough and see if I can get it open. I was waiting for the Foley. Oh no!
A mighty struggle indeed.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm drinking a.
This is Joe's Antarctic expedition. This
is Joe's Antarctic. Got it.
Sounds like you'll survive.
Victory. So I'm drinking a black cherry soda from Indian Wells Brewing Company out of Inyakern, California.
I think you've had something from them before.
I have. I've had something from Indian Wells Brewing Company, but I've not had this on the show.
Well, it is cherry blossom season here in DC.
I think it's different. But anyway, I've had this before, and but not on the show. But it's a very good soda. It comes in a giant 22-ounce glass bottle with a waxed on cap.
Yeah, we could tell the wax part.
But it's a really good cherry soda. And if you can find it, I recommend it. Although it is like $7 a bottle at the soda shop.
Whoa.
Wow.
Which is, I feel like expensithey for a soda.
You really got to give the master blender another taste of the original so he can bring that price point down.
Yeah, I know, right? They went all the way to Antarctica for these cherries. Antarctic cherries. The cherries are from Ohio. They get the wild, natural black cherries from Ohio.
That's pretty cool.
You know how I know you're lying about them being from Antarctica?
I couldn't possibly hazard a guess.
Flowering plants.
They call them cerezas there.
Oh, is that right?
So would anyone like to know what I'm drinking?
No.
Hey, Ryan. Are you drinking something right now?
Well, Abe, I don't know if you knew about this, but Shackleton left Plymouth on August 8th, 1914, headed first for Buenos Aires on the start of his expedition to the Antarctic, and they had some Scotch whiskey with him, and recently a Kiwi team. I'm having the same whiskey Abe's having.
Strong work.
1914, eh?
We never pre-plan these things. Maybe we should.
A couple of things to point out. There's a good graphic novel about the expedition where I learned most of what I know about Shackleton's expedition, called Shackleton Antarctic Odyssey by Nick Bertozzi, and it's a very good graphic novel. And one of the things I learned, even though a portion of his crew was trapped on the ice for months and not a single person died.
Wow.
And they were like playing soccer and like hanging out and stuff. Crazy.
Yeah. Lemons and lemonade, right?
If anybody wants a historical account of that, there's also a book for that.
Well, yeah, I just recommended a graphic novel, which is better than a book because it's got pictures. Now, I will say the dogs do not fare as well.
They do not, but
No.
Endurance has some really awesome historical accounts of it. I believe they were also based on interviews of the survivors.
But having a sneaking suspicion that Abe would also be having the same Scotch and would tell the wonderful tale of Shackleton and his expedition as a person who's actually been to Antarctica, I wanted to mix up a little bit and have a cocktail, which I don't usually do Scotch cocktails, so this was a fun one for me. And I found a recipe that uses very basic and simple ingredients of things that I already had around the house, called the Drunk Uncle. And it's
I think is very fitting already.
It's from a book called The Negroni, Drinking to La Dolce Vita with Recipes and Lore. And it's a shot of Scotch. And then the very common ingredients that I think most people are going to have access to is 3/4 ounce of Cynar, which is an Italian bitter liqueur made from artichokes, and 3/4 ounce of Martini and Rossi Bianco vermouth, which is not sweet vermouth, not dry vermouth. It's a different kind of vermouth. It's Bianco vermouth. And so, I had those, and so I just went ahead and mixed it up with a twist, a little grapefruit bitters, and I'm gonna try it now. Ooh, that's very good. So it's supposed to be a riff on a Negroni. It's supposed to basically be a Scotch Negroni. And, I like that. The that kind of herbalness of the Cynar really cuts through the smokiness of the Scotch, and then the Bianco vermouth gives it a nice bright kind of sweetness. That's good.
Nice.
That's one of the better Scotch cocktails I've had, let alone made.
Next time, I think I should just go on over and record there so I can drink your drink too.
You had an invite.
That was my plan last time I was in DC. Didn't work out.
Yeah, just think of all the Cynar you could have been having, Joe.
I know.
Hey, maybe we should plan it for when you're back in DC.
We should.
Okay, to be discussed at a future date. That's a little teaser for the listener.
Oh,
TBD.
Coming up.
But now we are going to return to the second part of our interview where we discuss entering the political sphere with interviewee Jess Phoenix.
All the things I thought I'd be, all the brave things I'd done, vanished like a snowflake with the rising of the sun. Nevermore to sail my ship where no man is gone before. And I will go sailing no more.
So in addition to all of your actual science and scientific outreach, the main reason we wanted to have you on the show is because in this new modern political era, you are actually stepping up to the challenge of entering the field of politics and are running for office in the state of California, Congressional District 25. And so we just wanted to talk to you about that. So can you tell us kind of, I guess, your origin story of what radioactive politician bit you that made you want to go from science to politics?
Well, fortunately, he didn't get close enough to bite, but Donald Trump being elected made me very starkly aware of some of the potentials that we would be seeing. So, for example, loss of funding to the National Science Foundation, to NOAA, to NASA, and things that we've now seen come to pass with budgets. He's suggesting, like, getting rid of the funding for the earthquake early warning system and the volcano warning system and the tsunami warning system and the hurricane warning system. Like, I could go on. But there are so many things. And it's also the National Institutes of Health. And I thought that some of what he would do with the Department of the Interior or the EPA would be bad for not only scientific research, but also just for the environment as a whole. And, I realized that my congressman, Representative Steve Knight, has, at a certain point when I was deciding to get into the race, he was voting 98% with Trump. And he's maintained that. So I don't know what's happening under the time he doesn't vote with Trump, but this is our district, we voted for Hillary by 7%. So this is not a district that is like super Trump heavy by any means. And, Knight isn't representing the will of the people. And I gave a talk at the Natural History Museum here in LA. It was January 2017, and I had just turned 35. And I remember it because, I'm like, 35, that's kind of a big year. You could even run for president at 35. And, someone mentioned that and I laughed. And then it was just a couple days after the inauguration when I gave this talk. And a couple of friends of mine came up to me and they have twin 4-year-olds. Well, now they're 5. But they said, we are so afraid for the world that our boys are going to grow up in, with this anti-fact, anti-science kind of bias. And I would wish, we had scientists in government, and I wish science was in our policymaking. And I kind of went, oh, well, okay. And then a few other scientists who I work with came up to me at the same talk and said, yeah, we need scientists in office. Maybe that could be you. And I went, oh, maybe it could be. And from there, it was just a matter of, putting out some feelers and contacting people and saying, how on earth do you run for office? And I'll tell you that almost everything I heard was wildly incorrect. But like any good scientist, I'm learning as I go and I'm adapting and, trying to creatively problem solve. And it's been a crazy journey of almost a year now, but I think it's necessary. I think we need scientists to realize that, our individual research is important, but if we are not fighting tooth and nail to have science funded in our government and to have it prioritized and to have it listened to, then there will not be science for anybody to go around.
Well stated.
Well, I heard the whole thing about truth decay. Is a term I heard recently. I was listening to the To the Point podcast with the former NPR guy Warren Olney. Right, he was talking to somebody about truth decay in the modern politics, and I actually live up just north of your district, Jess. I'm in Kevin McCarthy's district, so I used to live in the 25th, and so it was interesting when I came across you. I was excited to see that a scientist was running for office nearby.
Move back
in my former district.
Move back.
Yeah, I know. But your campaign got me excited again, so I'm glad you're able to come on and join us, talk about all this and getting some science into office, because I think a lot of scientists, probably a lot of our listeners, look at politics and see just the disparity between the real world and what people seem to be voting based upon, and just those things don't line up, and it's really frustrating. So more science, more better.
I agree completely.
And to maybe turn that into a little bit of a question, how do you think your training as a scientist has informed some of the policy platforms that you've taken? If people go to jess2018.com, they can see your website, your campaign website, and we'll link to Blueprint Earth as well in the show notes for this episode, so people can go to scienceworld.com and find all this. But if they want to see your issues, you have issues about the economy and the environment and healthcare and education. And I think some of those issues, it's pretty obvious how they are informed by science, right? You don't understand the environment unless you understand environmental science. But maybe things like the economy and education, it's less clear how those can be coming from a scientific worldview. So can you elaborate a little bit on how maybe your training and your perspective makes you well suited to speak to these issues?
Sure. So with the education issue, because I taught at Cal State LA, I have a couple of years experience in the classroom, and, I see how, in certain cases, how underprepared students are to go into the world. And it's not just from a scientific perspective. It's from, thinking about what life skills they may or may not have. And so you also see the disparities between students who, go to schools with more funding, if they're going to public schools or versus, private schools, that sort of thing. So I have some decently well informed just from experience positions on education. And then not to mention, I like to read studies, give me scientific articles and I will read them. And so I've been diving into, middle school, for example, and the issues that exist for students in middle schools and why a lot of those issues, students are not well served by being removed from the school that they were in, K through 6 or K through 5, and then taken to a different school when they're in a time of, personal upheaval because of hormones. And then also, they're forced to change buildings, change routines, and students who are at different developmental levels aren't always well served by being removed from the environment that they've been in. So it's there's all this stuff that I'm learning about different educational models and the way that curriculums are developed or not developed, and you can use data to inform all of that. If you think about it, data can be at the heart of just about any issue. It's just how you check out the data that you're using, make sure that it's, valid data and that it's coming from reputable sources and has been, rigorously, examined or scrutinized. It's how do you look at the data and then what do you do with the data? And to me, that's the data analysis component that you bring from the world of science. It's just the scientific method. It's you can apply objectively to almost any issue. And I tell people, look, if you show me new data on something that is counter to, what my original position was, and it's good data, I will change my position. And that kind of blows people's minds to hear someone in politics say, yeah, I could change my mind.
Without being afraid of being called a flip-flopper or a waffler.
Mm-hmm. But that's it. You base it on fact, and it makes all the difference in the world.
I've always been very taken aback with people who just, believe that if you have an opinion or you have some kind of stance, then, you should be sticking to it. And, I totally agree with your point of view on this is I'm willing to change my opinion if you show me facts and you show me data and numbers that tell me and show me that my opinion is wrong. That there's nothing wrong with that. That actually makes us all better in the long term.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I mean, you're not a flip flopper if you can say like, no, this is why I changed my mind. Right. I was wrong, and here's why. Blah blah blah.
Yep.
And I'm happy to accept, I was wrong. I think that's part of the beauty. And for me, that was one of the best things about science is it's okay to be wrong.
Yes.
It's progressing to be wrong. Like,
you learn a lot.
We don't make progress otherwise.
Yeah. And I tell people that, like, I tell the students I work with all the time, don't work with somebody who is afraid to say they're wrong. I mean, because it's so important to the learning process and to doing good science, to improving any sort of work that you're doing is to know when you're wrong, because nobody's infallible.
Right.
What did you have to learn besides just the basics of how to register to run for office? What did you have to learn as part of the campaigning process, or like, where was the education there that made it so that you could stand up as a competent candidate and challenge an incumbent like Steve Knight?
Well, I will say that I'm still learning, and I think it's a process because there's a lot of, machinery in place that is for traditional candidates. And so if you want to run, typically, 80% of Congress is lawyers and business people. So these are people with networks that have a lot of money. And that the problem with a lot of what's wrong with America, the actual problem itself, is big money has undue influence in politics. And, people with the most money get listened to. They're the lobbyists, and they're the rich people who get to say, hey, I'm throwing my weight around and here are my donations and you need to listen to me. So in order to run a successful campaign these days, because of the finance laws we have to have a whole lot of money. And it's because you can spend pretty much unlimited amounts, and corporations can get treated like people in some instances. And so for me, it was realizing how much money actually controls everything. Money controls who endorses you. Money controls who will even talk to you. And it's not your resume. It's not your qualifications. It's just their bottom line. How much money did you raise? And to me, that is a really flawed way to make decisions. So I had to try that. I had to try the system where they lock you in basically a windowless room, and you get lists of names to call, people who are previous donors to campaigns, and you sit there and call them for 10 hours a day. And that's all you do. There's no shaking hands, kissing babies. That doesn't happen. And they just basically say fundraise, fundraise, fundraise. And then, as you get further along in the campaign, then it's like, okay, we'll go do a photo op. And that's it. And I find that to be so wrong and so counter to what we need in our representatives. We don't need professional fundraisers. We need people who can go out and look at the problems in the community and figure out the best ways to solve those problems. So I had to actually go through that windowless room hell and then reject it and say, this isn't going to work for me. I'm actually raising money this way, but I am not connecting with the community and I am not serving people in any way. So I said, screw it. I'm running a grassroots campaign. And that means I know I'm going to fundraise less money. I am not going to be the number one dollar raiser here. So I'm going to lose a lot of endorsement opportunities, the high profile ones, but I'm going to talk to more people and I'm going to be better informed about real issues. So I've been out like boots on the ground, talking to people. And the cool thing is there are results to show. I have the most number of individual donors, anybody in the race, including Steve Knight. And, he's an incumbent. So it's, and I mean the most by a lot. This is not a small thing. But my average donation is like $40. So when you realize that, raising close to $500,000, in $40 increments, that's kind of a little excited about what I'm trying to do. And, I'll tell you, I'm still adjusting because, politics is a total insider's game. And if you are coming from outside to disrupt the system, you are not welcomed with open arms. People want that. But I will tell you, even if you just look at Donald Trump as an example, total outsider, and the Republican establishment tried almost everything it knew how to keep him out, and he ended up winning. And now the Republican Party is having to adjust wildly, but people are sick of it. People are sick of business as usual, politics as usual. And so candidates like me, this is the time where we can come in and say, look, we want something different. We want something better. Let's make it happen.
I'll just be happy if you don't bring a snowball into the chambers with you.
Yeah.
That's literally the level I'm at right now and what I expect from these people.
Yeah. Sad.
And I am a person who grew up in a small state and actually has personal relationships with some of my representatives on Capitol Hill, a few short miles from where I'm sitting right now. And so, I sort of hesitate to say that on air, but it's the truth, and I'm pretty disappointed. And I don't even know if I want a radical shakeup. Like even a slight improvement towards making sense and being reasonable would be a great first step.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate that that's where it's come to, because I feel kind of similar. Like, I just want somebody who at least will look at facts and can tell facts from.
You can tell what a fact is.
Else.
Yeah.
Just facts. That's just not so much to ask.
Yeah. Well, let me let you guys in on something. It's kind of a secret, but it shouldn't be. But the people who say that they don't believe in climate change and are in government, they do. And particularly Donald Trump is a good case in point. On his application for a permit to build a seawall around one of his golf courses in Scotland, the reason on the permit that they needed to build the seawall was sea level rise due to climate change. So Donald Trump knows very much change. And so do the Republicans in Congress. In fact, in the mid-2000s, they were on board trying to find solutions to climate change. But, the fossil fuel lobby is huge and very, very wealthy. And They have these people who they've helped push into office. They got them by the short hairs, as they say, and they are not letting go. So that's why you see people denying basic science is you just always have to follow the money. You got to look at it and say, who is funding this and why? And then you figure out why people are making science statements and anti-fact statements.
I was just going to say, I just finished reading a book called, I think it was Dark Money. And if you want to get really depressed about the state of politics, read Dark Money and just be sad.
Too late.
Do that or run for Congress, either one.
Yeah. Or, both.
But guys, what if we just got, and I use guys in an all-encompassing, non-gendered way, what if we just got, hey folks, what if we just got all the earth scientists to stop telling the oil companies where the oil is?
Yes.
Oh, there you go.
Oh my God.
They kind of need us for that.
Yeah.
So you mean like instead of the fake conspiracy about all the climate scientists pretending it's real, have an actual conspiracy?
It's sort of like how the drug companies stopped sending the drugs that kill people to Oklahoma, and so they ran out of ways to lethally inject people legally, and so then they were having trouble. Like it's, sometimes you can just cut them off at the source, right?
Yeah, I like that.
I don't think anyone who's listening is going to be surprised to hear that running for Congress kind of sucks. But what's been a fun thing to learn, or what's been rewarding about this process so far that you're still excited to be doing this?
Yes.
The amount of people, it is, yes, you're right. It is soul-crushingly oppressive. But the amount of people who are so genuine in what they care about and who are genuine in how they interact with me, it's just amazing. And you give a little bit of kindness and it goes a long way. And I've had, young women come up to me and say, I am a scientist, or I'm going to college to be a scientist, and I can't believe that you're out here doing this. Thank you so much. You're inspiring me. And it just is moving when you see people with tears in their eyes going, I'm looking up to you. And I have people who are my age or older writing to me and saying, thank you for doing this. Like, you are blazing a trail. Like, I want to make the jump from science into politics, and I didn't know how, but I'm going to do it. Thank you. And it's kind of amazing. And then I'm the only candidate in my race who speaks Spanish, and our district is 38% Latino. And so I've been going out and talking to people, and I meet people all the time. Like, I just a couple weeks ago met a woman from El Salvador, and she's been in the US for 32 years. And we're talking, and she didn't realize that the event was for me, that I'm the one running. And so we're talking, and I said, well, that's why I'm running for Congress, because, Steve and I did X, Y, or Z. And she said, wait, you're the one running? And I said, yeah, I'm the scientist who's running. And she said, oh my God, in 32 years, I've never once voted because nobody's been talking to me. But you're sitting here talking to me, and you're talking to me in Spanish. And I can't believe that. And that is, I'm going to vote for you, and I'm going to tell everybody in my Zumba class. So
nice, getting that Zumba contingent.
Yeah, it's the Spanish speaking Zumba vote. I've got that locked down.
Awesome.
what lesson have you learned running for Congress that you wish you could tell every scientist who's listening, even if they don't have any intention of entering the field of politics, but just something you want scientists to know about your experience so far?
Okay, here it is. Everybody better write this down. Science is political. Okay, it is. Scientific method is not. That is objective. But science is political. And we as scientists stopped speaking out about what we believed in politically when Robert Oppenheimer was persecuted 64 years ago. And, he had his security clearance revoked because he was speaking out about, nuclear dangers and, in terms of the bomb and everything. So we as scientists, we need to get vocal again politically, because when a government prioritizes science funding or doesn't prioritize that, it's making a political statement. So all the work we do, because the majority of science funding comes from the federal government, our work is inherently political. And so we have to be vocal about what needs to be in the political conversation. It's a duty, and we all need to see it as such.
I couldn't agree less.
Less?
More. The other way. What's the phrase?
Just say it.
More.
Couldn't agree more.
Let me start all over. I couldn't agree more.
También en español.
Estoy de acuerdo.
Muchas gracias.
No más. No menos.
Muy bien dicho.
I'm confused. All right. So, Jess, if people want to learn more about your campaign and the issues you stand for, besides, your obvious passion for science, where can they go? What can they do? Even people who don't necessarily live in your district, what can our general listenership do if they just want to plug in and understand your campaign better?
Sure. So I'm on Twitter a lot. The internet is a cesspool, but there's also amazing things happening on it. And Twitter's
like this
a great way to
podcast.
connect with people. There
your
you
favorite
go.
Science cesspool.
Uh-huh.
That's right.
That sounds like a really good tagline. You should use that. But yeah, Twitter, I'm at Jess Phoenix 2018, and then you can find me on Facebook, and it's facebook.com/JessPHX. Those are the letters of the Phoenix airport code. So there you go. And then on Instagram, it's Jess Phoenix 2018. And those are the places you can find me lurking, mostly on Twitter. And I will say that we really need people, and this is a hard thing for a lot of people to do. If you like what you see, and it's not just me, but support candidates, give them your money. Doesn't have to be a lot. It can be $5, it can be $50, it can be $500, or $2,700 if you want to donate the maximum to your favorite congressional candidate. But we need people engaged in community, and because that's how we get on the ballot. Without that early support, then we can't make it on the ballot, and you don't get a real say in who is on the ballot if you don't donate to the candidates you like. And then, of course, we need volunteers, and that's people from all over. We can even have volunteers who don't live in the U.S. So if you're listening from abroad and you want help with things like data analysis, phone banking, those sorts of things, you can do those remotely. And we definitely need help with it. So if you live here in Southern California, we have tons of volunteer opportunities available. Say if you're on sabbatical and you want to come help in the June 5th primary, we actually can provide housing, and you can come out and be a full-time campaign volunteer, and we will give you housing, and you will get to be boots on the ground and get some real world experience in a campaign. So, that you can contact us via email through the website, or find me on one of those social media platforms and say you want to help out, and we'll make sure that we find some way to keep you busy.
Awesome.
Wow. All right. That's a lot of good info.
No shortage.
Is there anything we didn't ask you, or something, any platform or soapbox you need to stand on for a minute that we didn't give you a chance to previous to this moment?
Well, I didn't get to make any geology puns yet. So, I could just tell you that it would be really nice, even though it's a little bit tough to elect a scientist.
All right, look at the time. We're actually out of time right now. We have to go.
Yeah.
This is all the time we had scheduled.
That was such a shifty pun.
I think that rocked.
Thank you. No, thanks, guys. This has been great.
No, it was a real pleasure to talk to you, and we were fascinated by the fact that you're out there taking a stand and literally putting your name on the line in terms of trying to promote your message of science and inclusivity and promotion. And that's a message we can definitely support, even though unfortunately none of us live in your district and will be able to vote for you. But
that's okay. We tell people.
We're all pretty excited for it.
Yeah.
Yes, we're very excited for you. And if you end up in DC, be sure to well, obviously we'll be paying attention, but for the purpose of the show, be sure to let us know, because Abe and I will meet up with you on Capitol Hill and grab a drink.
Yeah.
Sweet. All right. Well, thank you guys. This was great. And yeah, anytime you want to talk rocks or anything else, let me know.
Awesome.
We will. And we'll be sure to link to all of your social media and your website in the show notes for this episode. So just go to scienceorder.com and check out the show notes for this episode to see all of that. And thank you again so much for joining us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Pleasure talking to you, Jess.
Well, thanks again to Jess for giving us some of her time. We really appreciated getting to talk to her, and best of luck to her in the elections to come. We often solicit feedback, not an electoral sort, more of a one-off opinionated sort from our listeners, and we feature that in our final segment of the show, which we call the PaleoPOW. And that's coming up next.
Pow.
Ow.
Business calls me, trouble down the waterfront. You know I tried to, now I'm running out of lies. It's a clear view when all your eyes getting paid. No more favors, I know what we can do about it. I think I better run. Think I better run. Didn't catch me falling.
The PaleoPOWs segment of the show, where feedback rears its ugly head and we beat it back down until it regrows as 3 more, because feedback is Hydra-like in that sense. Take one out and 2 more rise to take its place. And so one of our favorite types of Hydras to fight against the ever-growing maw of is the patrons, which are the people that choose to support us on patreon.com/scienceorder. And if you support us at the Avogadro's Army level or higher, you get a patron thesis. And this time, our patron thesis is going to someone who's now signing his emails as M2, but as I know him, Morgan, because the first M stands for Morgan and the second M stands for bleep.
I like M squared.
M squared. Yeah, the little carrot.
Squared.
The carrot would help. Morgan,
Yeah.
get it together. Put a little carrot in between your M and your 2.
M to the second
Or
power.
just, superscript.
That's not always going to work with the formatting. I think the carrot is a safer bet
Alt plus.
from a font perspective.
Yeah.
Anyway, he writes in reference to his new patronage. Hey, PaleoPOWs. It's been a long while since I've written in, but I want to let you know that I'm now officially a member of Avogadro's Army. I've said it before and I'll say it again. This show is one of my favorites. Feels like I get to jump into a conversation among friends, high-level intellectual discourse, dad jokes, and the occasional meandering tangent, all speaking my language. Had a crazy moment of synchronicity yesterday as I was catching up with the most recently dropped episodes. I headed out snowshoeing in my backyard, Desolation Wilderness, and suddenly find myself listening to Ryan interview Allison Jones about her research right here in the Desolation Wilderness. If you've been getting that linen bar Christmas card with pictures of towels out in the wild, yeah, those shots are taken here in Deso. Mount Talek is my mountain, and hiking in Deso is where I listen to most of your podcasts. That moment inspired me to finally pull the trigger and join in the Patreon campaign. I'll let the already recurring donation keep doing its things. Feels like some old school street cred now.
Awesome.
I help run a place out here that hosts the occasional academic conference. I've always wondered if any fellow listeners have stayed with us on Fallen Leaf. If any of you or any of your listeners ever make it out this way, we always have free coffee for scientists. I will repeat, we always have free coffee for scientists. That's me, Ryan, repeating that because free coffee, scientists.
Scientists.
Anyway, to wrap up Morgan's email, thanks again for the science and the sort of. Well, thank you, Morgan. You're one of the good ones.
Yeah, awesome.
Thanks, M squared.
M to the second power.
I know Joe and I have met Morgan. Abe, were you there when we all hung out with Morgan in San Francisco?
No, because I have not met Joe in real life, face-to-face person.
Oh, yeah.
All right. And Morgan also knows Charlie's wife.
I know Charlie's wife.
That's not a joke. That's a real...
Go
like,
on.
they were just friends in high school or something. So Morgan has a weird... Like, Morgan is the weird background retcon person who's been moving through all of our lives all this time. So Morgan's always been there. That time you only saw one set of footprints, Joe?
Puppet master.
That's when Morgan carried you.
Yeah. Gotcha.
We got to give Morgan a thesis. Bro Hames.
Political science thesis.
Well, he also talked a lot about the Desolation Wilderness, Abe, in California. So it should definitely be some sort of...
And how he was a recurring donor before anybody else was.
Yeah.
Hipster Morgan was a recurring donor
so
before you.
It should be some sort of...
Before it was
California.
cool.
It should be more California than it should be anything else, I think. And we all have a connection to California, including Morgan. And the show was a very California-centric show. So can we give him some sort of California situation?
Calamorganication.
I mean, sure, you could say that, but we still need to come up with a thesis that makes sense.
That's Calamorganication,
I don't approve of that at all.
Fine. Semicolon.
Sorry.
Even worse.
Do we want to bring... Are we making it political at all?
Maybe has he studied something about the effect of giving free coffee to scientists?
Oh, a study in desolation.
Fornication.
God, that's not better.
Caffeine fornication.
Fornication.
That's not better.
No, that just sounds.
Yeah, that sounds like a television program.
Yes, I disapprove. Colon or semicolon.
Isn't there's a type of mirage that has Morgan's name in it?
Fata Morgana.
That would be it. So can we do something with that?
Wow.
Let's see.
Okay.
The effect of caffeine,
right.
of free-flowing caffeine on Fata Morgana
off of Lake Tahoe.
What's this? Desolation?
He's up in Lake Tahoe, right? Fata Morgana's got to be over water, doesn't it?
Not necessarily.
But can it be?
If I agree.
Yeah, it's got nothing to do with water. It's atmospheric inversion. So it can be over desert. It can be over...
I'm looking at a lot of photos of Fata Morganas right now, and I ain't seeing any land.
Let me send you a picture I took in McMurdo of Fata Morgana over ice.
Oh, ice, a type of water. You burnt.
All mineral.
You burnt. Okay, we can do it all right, fine. We'll do it in the Desolation Wilderness. Okay, so
I'm looking at a picture of a sailboat floating. That's not real, JK.
Yes. Floating sailboats are pretty common.
Oh, okay.
Fata in the Desolation Wilderness.
Just Google Fata Morgana desert and you'll find it.
So the effect of free coffee on observations of Fata Morgana in the Desolation Wilderness, boulders be floating.
Boulders be floating?
I don't know. We usually have a dumb comma or a dumb colon title.
Something, the Flying Dutchman.
Oh, deciphering the Flying Dutchman.
Because he's M squared, what if we did Fata Morganas within Fata Morganas in the Desolation Wilderness?
That could work.
All right, I think that's dumb enough that it doesn't need a colon. The effect of free coffee on observations of Fata Morgana within Fata Morgana in the Desolation Wilderness, California.
Sure.
Morgan?
I'm okay with that.
You just got your Morgana. Your thesis. All right. Well, that was mine.
Sweet.
Who's next?
Oh, I can go next. I have an email.
Okay.
I have an email from Les from Canada.
We usually just do first name, last initial.
Oh, I got one.
Okay.
I have an email from Les I from Edmonton, Alberta.
Lay it on us.
The subject of his message to us is, what are you drinking? ... out of. Hi all. Les I from Edmonton again. You're probably wondering why I have gathered you here today. Well, it's simple. I really enjoy my science sort of frosted beverage holder, and when there are people visiting, they always ask about it. So I was wondering if there is a 4-pack of podcast pint holders in the works. I think it'd be pretty swell. It's also too bad there is no Brachiolope Brew Pack. And then he gives us a list of potential future Brachiolope Brew versions. the technically speaking gearbox porter.
Should we point out that you're a home brewer, Abe?
Yeah, so Ryan and I have both been home brewers.
That was part of the reason I sent this to you, because I thought you would get a kick out of these ideas for beers.
I love it. I'm already getting ideas. And it's totally something we can make happen, sort of.
Or for real.
Or for reals. So Les's suggestions are, he gives us a 6-pack of suggestions. Technically speaking, gearbox porter. Technically speaking, brainstorm electric IPA. The weekly Wienerschmidt parasitic pilsner. The science sort of Sasquatch stout. Titanium physicist Thai Phi PA. And lastly, the Titanium Physicist Bunny Brew. And he wraps it up by saying, anyway, thanks for the hard work you all do. It is very appreciated. Cheers from Les. Well, Les, we've already mentioned it. I'm a home brewer. Ryan has home brewed as well. So I think these are things that he and I could probably make happen in the near future.
I'm confused. I mean, it's good that Joe's here because I'm confused by his technically speaking ones, because those don't. The other ones either are alliterative or, they're all alliterative and kind of make sense. I guess the Bunny Brew would be a brown ale, I'm thinking, Abe.
Yes.
Bunny Brew brown ale.
Bunny Brew brown.
Thai Phi PA, that's golden awesome. Sasquatch Stout will get sued by Great Divide. But it's fine.
I am a fan of parasitic pilsner.
Yeah,
parasitic pilsner is excellent.
That is the best in the list.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the gearbox porter or the brainstorm electric. So I like the brainstorm. Go ahead, Joe.
So I like, first of all, I like that. Technically speaking, got two beers to Science Sorters 1, despite having been off the air for like 3 years. But I appreciate it all the same.
This is not a new email.
Technically speaking, the Science sort of got the heaviest of the beers.
All right, we have a little thing called a backlog.
So we reached deep into the backlog, is what you're saying. That's fine.
I reached appropriately into the backlog to find something Abe would enjoy.
Gotcha. And you know what? I enjoy it too, so that works out.
I'm enjoying it.
So what's about you?
I have inspiration.
So I think the gearbox porter can work, because a porter is like a dark beer, right?
Yep.
So gear oil is very dark. It does smell terrible, so I don't know if that portends well for a beer.
The porter or the gearbox?
The gear oil is one of the foulest smelling things man has ever created.
You've never smelled the inside of a long dead sloth.
Well, that's why I said man has ever created.
Oh, man has ever. Well, I got bad news about sloths.
You thought they smelled bad on the outside.
Thank you.
The
brainstorm electric
IPA, though, yeah, I don't know about that one. I mean, brainstorm, cool, dig it.
Can you think of a technically speaking pun or funny name that would work for like a root beer?
I don't know. Something about Elon Musk, probably.
Or I almost wondering like a technically speaking like low gear. Like using low gear for a non-alcoholic beer.
Yeah, or first gear or something.
Yeah, like shifting down.
Are there any kind of roots or like fundamentals of engineering?
There's a roots supercharger.
First, do no harm.
That's a thing.
Is that first engineering supercharger? Or is that medicine?
That's medicine.
It's like considered a root.
Ooh, but like, yeah, turbocharged IPA. I feel like electric is a little maybe too progressive for the IPA we're going to be making, for technically speaking.
I like turbocharged IPA. Yeah. I think that's
double. That'd be a double IPA, I think.
Doubly tech.
Because it can be. You can have double. You can have two turbochargers on a thing, right? Or two
twin turbo,
double turbocharger IPA.
Twin charge.
Twin turbo.
Twin charge double IPA.
Okay, forget you, electric IPA.
Twin turbo. Double IPA.
I know it's the way of the future, but we're stuck in the past. Yeah. We're backlogging, right?
Yeah.
There you go. Electric will be for the future.
And then if we stick with the porter, then you could have a technically speaking black and tan.
Oh, there you go.
From the two beers. And that's cool. All right. Good job, Les.
Hooray.
That works. Yeah. Thank you, Les, for the suggestions. We'll let you know if and when any of these come to fruition.
Yeah, honestly, the hardest one to actually homebrew would be the Pilsner.
Yeah.
Because essentially, when it comes to home brewing, you brew things that can take the most punishment without actually displaying any flavors that are off. And so, like, in order of ease of brewing, it would probably go, or difficulty of brewing, the Pilsner would be the hardest, the Pale Ale would be the second hardest, the Brown Ale would be the third, and then I guess Porter, and then it'd be a toss-up between the Stout and the Double IPA. That's the difficulty curve as I perceive it.
A Pilsner is also a lagered,
right? Exactly.
Beer, so that doubles the difficulty.
But it's you can't get away with doing much wrong.
Yeah, and for any of you listeners out there that aren't familiar with lagering versus ale yeasts, lager yeasts ferments at much lower temperature, so the challenge becomes keeping your your fermenting liquid at a low temperature
for longer too, because they take longer to ferment
for weeks.
Yeah.
Yes, but typically you need temperatures below 55 or so. It escapes me, but
so I guess we should make this our call. We should say that if any other listeners out there are home brewers and have recipes, send them in.
Send them our way. We should try them out this summer.
PaleoPOWs at sciencesortof.com, or the contact page at sciencesortof.com, or Abe at sciencesortof, or Ryan at sciencesortof, or Joe at sciencesortof if you want it to be ignored.
I'd forward it on.
Yeah, I don't know. Joe might forward them to me.
I'd forward it.
Joe, what
there you go. Joe forwarded them to me.
What do you have for us, friend?
Joe, have an iTunes review.
Hey.
And not only do I have an iTunes review, I have the best kind of iTunes review, a 5-star iTunes review.
Well, that's good, because Abe and I got tricked by a non-5-star review recently.
What? How dare they?
We thought it was 5-star, but then it turned out it was fewer than 5 stars.
Fake news, Ryan. Fake news.
It was sad. It was a sad day for all of us.
Fake reviews.
I assure you, I only get 5-star reviews. I assure you.
Oh, good.
There's no problem. So anyway, this review comes from Boiler Up 75 on iTunes. His review is titled "Brilliant," sort of. Of course, then he jumps right in with, "Just kidding, no sort of." So that's good. This podcast is fantastic.
Wait, hang on. The way that's written, it could be "just kidding, no sort of," which could mean "no, I'm sort of kidding," or "no, negate the sort of" in the subject line. You know what I mean?
That's true.
But there is no punctuation between the no and the sort of.
I still think that's unclear. I think specificity is the soul of narrative. Boiler Up. Appreciate the 5 stars.
He's negating the sort of by not using any punctuation in between.
I'm pretty excited to hear the rest of the review, but I've got comments.
You know, it's the difference between Let's Eat Grandma and Let's Eat Grandma, right? So
exactly.
Eat shoots and leaves. Are you describing a mobster, or are you describing a panda?
All right. So, just kidding. No sort of. This podcast is fantastic. It encourages your outer nerd to stop pretending it's an inner nerd. Ryan is a great host, bringing talented guests on the show. Never a dull moment. Science education is more important than ever, and this podcast nails it.
Whoop whoop.
And I think this review is helpful.
I think so too.
I think Boiler Up 75 nailed it.
How are we doing on the old review front, Joseph? Can we get an audit from a trusted engineer?
Unfortunately, you can't, because I don't have iTunes installed anymore.
But I explained to you the situation earlier.
Oh, that's true. You did. So we're sitting at like a 4.5 right now.
Oh, that hurts. I don't love it. Don't love it.
That's a little painful. So we could really use a solid 5. You know, a 5 average would be a lot better than a 4.5 average.
Joe, would you say it's
Way
worth
better.
reinstalling iTunes for 10 minutes to give us a 5-star review and then deleting iTunes and running away?
I think so. Okay. If you're one of those people that has not reviewed the show, and you haven't reviewed the show because you just don't like iTunes,
You're not wrong.
you're not wrong. 2, be a pal. You know, be a friend. Thank you for being a friend. Reinstall iTunes.
We like friends.
Regardless of your iTunes hatred, it is the way that a lot of people find the show. And so the best way for them to find the show is to make sure we have good reviews on iTunes. And so pains me, and I hate that I care this much, but like the 4.5 stars, we've dropped to 4.5 stars once before, but we had a low enough number of reviews that it didn't make a huge impact. But now we have a lot of reviews, and that's because you guys are awesome. But it means that we need a little bit more help to get back up to that full 5 stars. So please help us out, get us back out to 5 stars. We really appreciate it. Do we need to do a contest again? I'm not going to authorize that in the moment, but maybe we'll do a contest. You don't know.
Yeah.
If we do a contest, it'll start now with this episode and not with whatever episode we announce it later. There, I can authorize that.
You can pre-enter the contest with which you don't know the details.
You'll get something.
Leave a review. Maybe you'll win.
We got stuff. Joel, drive a car to you. I don't know.
Like we're volunteering a lot there.
Was there a second half
Joe
of
drives
that?
a car every day.
Joe already drives a car. Joe will drive a plane.
Joe will drive a plane.
All right, how you guys doing? You got anything to plug? You got anything going on?
You know, I don't have anything to plug at the moment. Not a whole lot going on.
I don't either.
You know what? No, I will plug some stuff. Long-time listeners will know that I volunteer a lot with the Baja SAE program. We're now back into Baja season. I'm not running a competition this year, but I will be volunteering at a couple of them. So coming up in May and June are 2 different Baja races. May is in Pittsburgh, Kansas. And so if you live in the Kansas City, Pittsburgh area, May 17th through the 20th in Pittsburgh, Kansas is Baja SAE Kansas. And if you live in Portland, Oregon area and feel like coming to see a Baja race or volunteering to help out, May 30th through June 2nd will be Baja SAE Oregon. If you feel like coming out to volunteer for one of those events, I'm sure the organizers will greatly appreciate your help. If you want to volunteer for that, you can go to www.bajasae.net and click sign up as an on-site volunteer at the bottom of the page.
And these are races where students build kit cars based on specific specifications and then race them against each other?
Yeah, it's a collegiate competition. So we get students from schools all over the world building these little off-road buggies with a 10 horsepower engine. And they design them, they build them, they bring them to competition, and they race them against each other. We usually get about 100 cars per competition. So pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. In terms of encouraging students to pursue science, it's not really a plug, but Abe and I were excited to volunteer as judges for our local science fairs. Abe and I don't live in the same county, so we couldn't do the same science fair, but I did a science fair here in the District of Columbia, and Abe was out in Fairfax doing a science fair too. And
fun.
Yeah. East Virginia.
How was your experience, Abe?
It was great. It was actually really inspiring to see so many high schoolers getting really, really deeply involved in just like everything from basic science projects to some pretty intricate, like well thought out, well built up science projects. It was amazing. So it was really inspiring to see just the enthusiasm from all of the students that I spoke with. And I think, I got to say some of my favorite were there were a few teams and individual projects that were done with almost like no resources. It was amazing. It's just, whatever they could find in their home. And to me, that required a lot more creativity to take, a science idea and turn it into a project with basically zero investment outside of what your time. And it was mind blowing. I like to think about, what I was doing back in high school. And yeah, I don't know that I could be that creative, but maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. And I was judging projects here in the district and I felt the same. I felt like the things they were doing were really impressive given the resources available. And I even had a student, not even in high school, I think they were in middle school, reinterpret data, like say the phrase to me, well, I plotted the data this way and I felt that it wasn't very compelling. It didn't actually present my results. So I reinterpreted and I recalculated some stuff and replotted it this way. And it's just like, I know it's inappropriate to hug you, but I want to hug you right now because that's awesome. Like that is science, right? Like that's how you do it. Is when you
science.
Yeah, when you realize like, oh, I have the data. I'm not going to manipulate the data, but I'm going to change how I show it to you to make my result more clear. Oh, yeah. So that was awesome.
That's awesome.
And then I also felt I did science fair projects as a kid, and I felt that the projects I saw at the district science fair it's the DC STEM fair, were a lot more community minded than my projects ever were. It was a lot of like, how do we improve the water quality for our region, or how do we think about pollution that's affecting people, or how do we think about like making sure urban gardens and plants are growing, and like food scarcity. And it was a lot of really impressive stuff that actually is pointing towards making a difference in a way that my projects never were. Not in a way that I'm ashamed of my projects, but just like the ethos of doing science for young people seems to be shifting in a way that I think is really positive and awesome. And
Nice.
it was a lot of fun. So
Yeah, I agree. I'll mention just one of the projects that just like I absolutely loved. It was a team project. And these two high school young ladies decided to test the compostable, biodegradable idea of bags of chips in their backyard. And so like that's literally all they require, like 6 weeks of burying and like trying to keep the exact same conditions for their 3 or 4 different types. But they went to the grocery store and just found chip companies that advertise a biodegradable bag. And that was like they just tested it. Yeah. And it was such a simple concept, but such a well thought out, just big picture idea. Can you do this in your backyard?
And so there are a lot of reasons we can't necessarily do a live show at a science fair, but I would definitely say look into volunteering with a local science fair in your community.
Yeah.
It's a one day, not even one morning, one afternoon commitment to go judge a science fair and go give feedback to students who are desperate for it and really excited to hear it. And I find it incredibly rewarding. I've done it a couple of years now in the various places I've lived. So check it out.
Yeah, we'll definitely be doing it again. And it's actually really awesome. We've received 3 different thank you letters from students.
Yeah, I did one in Florida a couple years ago. It was pretty fun.
Yeah.
Go young scientists.
All right, well, I think that about wraps it up for us. Go check out the show notes for this episode at sciencesortof.com. And we're also available on Twitter and Facebook, but not on Instagram because
it's a lot of work.
I'm tired. I'm tired, you guys, but it's fine. We're hanging in there. We're doing the big work, and we're really excited to be chatting with all y'all about all the science and the sort of and the politics and the fairs and everything that's happening. This was a very community-focused episode for us, and I'm proud of that.
It is.
So,
yeah. It was fun.
Thank you both for joining me. Thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next time for a whole lot more science.
Sort of.
Visit sciencesortof.com for show notes, links to all the stories we talked about, and ways to interact with the hosts, guests, and other listeners. Science Sort of is brought to you by the Brachiolope Media Network of podcasts, with audio engineering by Tim Dobbs of the Encyclopedia Brunch podcast. That's all for this week. See you next time on Science Sort of.
Did you know you can model most things as a sphere?
Like phoenixes? Phoenixes?
Phoenixes? I don't think phoenixes is a word.
Ryan. Phoenix.